Hello. I think that I'm live. Yeah, I seem to be live. Hi, welcome to the Kitchen Lectures series, live from my kitchen. I'm Dr. Richard Leahy. I teach English literature at the University of Chester. I'm going to be talking to you today a little bit about why we study literature, what the benefits of it are to you on a sort of personal level and a career/academic level as well. And yeah, I'm going to explore a few different ideas that we look at in the literature team. So first things first, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Richard Leahy. I studied English Lit and Journalism at Chester. I studied my MA in 19th century literature at Chester. And then I did my PhD at Chester as well, which eventually got turned into this rather attractive book, which hopefully you can see not backwards. Hopefully. Anyway, so let's think. Today I'm going to be introducing you to some key ideas regarding the study of English literature, while also suggesting the worth and value of dedicating yourself to the study of words. I'm going to try and answer these questions via asking another question, which is a fairly typical concept in literary studies. And I'll ask that question in a moment, but just to clarify, if you do have any questions regarding the courses, anything really, anything at all, type it in the chat. I'll get to it. There will be a bit of a few minutes for questions towards the end. But there is also some I'll hopefully get some interaction as well, and I'll ask some questions which you can respond to in the live chat. So let's think about what literature can offer us, what literature can give to us. And more specifically, what the study of it can provide to us as well. So in order to answer these questions, I'm going to ask a question that we typically ask in the first year, which is, how much free will does Harry Potter have? I've got two different editions here, my very old battered 1997 edition and this fairly new edition as well. So how much free will does Harry Potter have? If you've got any thoughts on that, like if you think he's got a lot of free will, no free will, anything, just pop it in the comments and write your thoughts there and we'll feedback. So keep that question in mind. How much free will does Harry Potter have? So literature, language and story help us to understand the fundamentals of the world around us. It's literature, language and story are the things that make us different to any other living thing. Our ancestors were elevated beyond animals by their capacity to gossip, to share stories, and to collectively imagine something. And this is what spurred on humanity's social, cultural, and cognitive evolutions. Interesting, Christopher. Interesting. Let me just read this quote from Yuval Noah Harari's *Sapiens* out. So if we're thinking about how our ancestors were elevated beyond their animal cognitive abilities to more human levels, check this out. So legends, myths, gods, and religions appeared for the first time with the cognitive revolution. Many animals and human species could previously say, careful, a lion. Thanks to the cognitive revolution, though, Homo sapiens acquired the ability to say, the lion is the guardian spirit of our tribe. This ability to speak about fictions is the most unique feature of sapiens language. So it's relatively easy to agree that only Homo sapiens can speak about things that don't really exist and believe 6 impossible things before breakfast. You could never convince a monkey to give you a banana by promising him limitless bananas after death in monkey heaven. But why is it important? After all, fiction can be dangerously misleading or distracting. People who go to the forest looking for fairies and unicorns would seem to have less chance of survival than people who go looking for mushrooms and deer. And if you spend hours praying to non-existing guardian spirits, aren't you wasting precious time better spent foraging, fighting, and fornicating? But fiction has enabled us to not merely imagine things, but to do so collectively. So we can weave common myths, such as the biblical creation story, the Dreamtime myths of Aboriginal Australians, and the nationalist myths of modern states. Such myths give sapiens, or human beings, the unprecedented ability to cooperate flexibly in large numbers. And this is the beauty of literature, is that it allows us to connect to each other, but also to recognize something in ourselves as well. So this collective group imagination is what allows political systems to function, fan communities to be developed, and generally enables us to be more empathetic. Literature is a really unique art form in this respect, in that it permits us both escapism and empathicness in the same package. So I presume that a lot of people watching now, or a lot of people interested in English literature courses, will have turned to books and literature as a way of removing yourself from the current situation. As a way of escaping the world right now, as you try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes for a few hours and try and escape this strange world that we currently live in. So literature can help us to change the way that we think about ourselves, but also the world around us. Literary study over the past century has changed the way that we think about the idea of the subject, or this term subject is a really useful bit of critical language. Subject, the term, to use the term subject instead of I, me, self, individual. To use the term subject suggests that there are forces acting on us. There are things that are influencing us and the way that we behave. We are both subjects of ourselves, but also subject to influence. And literature can help us to expose and explore these different influences that make society what it is, that make culture what it is, that make us what we are. So by exposing all of these different influences, if we can recognize it in the word, we can recognize it in the world. Studying literature isn't necessarily about the study of literature itself. Yeah, absolutely, Christopher. Interesting point. I'll come back to that later. So this reflexive relationship between literature and the world is something that I find really fascinating. It's something that we explore quite a lot in the first year of literature studies at Chester. So this understanding that we're both subject of and subject to literature can be applied to literature itself. As Christopher, as you said, all characters are under the will of the author, but what is the will of the author influenced by? We have this constant stream of intertextual influence that we attempt to pick out. So this subjectivity, this debate around subjectivity and the influence of literature is important to us because of what literature can provide. So the study of English literature offers us a unique opportunity to improve resilience through active reading. There has been a great push over the last few years to use reading to improve concentration, mental health, and resilience. And indeed, at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences Sustainability and Resilience Conference in 2017, a panel entitled Storytelling and Resilience looked at literature's unique role in the function of and overcoming of trauma. So Jean-Michel Ganto, speaking at this conference, suggests that the not knowing knowledge of fiction guarantees not so much a knowledge as a shared experience that elicits a singular response to events caught in their singularity and therefore opens the door to healing. So what Ganto suggests here is that literature can offer us a shared experience. As we step into someone else's shoes, it can help us to understand their situations, their lives, their issues. Interesting point, Christopher. Yet again, we'll get to this. So this sort of consistent wearing of other people's shoes in literature allows readers of literature to feel something else. We're allowed to explore different mindsets, different emotions than what we typically live. This has influenced the selection of texts for first year study, where we have William Shakespeare's Hamlet, quite a universal tale. We have Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Purple Hibiscus, a Nigerian novel. Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, all-time classic. Ian McEwan's Nutshell, which is a story told from the perspective of an unborn baby, and Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, another classic. So what we do when we talk about these texts is we look at the relationships between them. We try to look for patterns. We try to look for, as Christopher suggests here, this synthesis of authors and fiction and the world. literature is really the study of everything, not just words, not just it's you study psychology, you study sociology, it's a bit of everything. So let's go back to that question that I proposed at the start, which is how much free will does Harry Potter have? And Christopher, I think that there are some interesting comments that you've made here. So all characters are under the will of the author. That's an interesting metatextual response here. But as I said, this and your idea here of the author's synthesis of the world around them, this is something that was addressed when a man called Roland Barthes addressed the idea of the subject in the 1960s. So he adopted this vision of the subject as something malleable, as something changeable, and started to apply it to the concept of the author. So he wrote an article, an essay called Death of the Author in the 1960s, which is a really, really influential text on the study of literature. And in it, he argued that meaning doesn't originate from the author. As you say, Christopher, authors synthesize into fiction the world around them. Yeah, absolutely. But that defeats the idea of an author god. That defeats the idea of authorial authority. And instead, it expands that origin of meaning out to all of the different influences that have acted on that piece of literature. So if we think about Harry Potter and free will, does Harry Potter have much free will? Well, in the sense of the story, he sort of does. He chooses not to go to Slytherin. He's Gryffindor or Slytherin. Better be Gryffindor, says the Sorting Hat. He has these moments of choice, but is this interpolation? Is this what Louis Althusser calls the illusion of choice? And we can think about this in terms of his literary heritage as well. He is the chosen one. He is the boy who lived. We don't pick up Harry Potter and wonder whether Harry Potter will die. The book is named after him. He probably won't. But his life, his movement through this text is dictated by what is called the hero's journey. And this is the idea of the monomyth, or what Joseph Campbell termed the monomyth. Harry's destiny as hero is already written before we even start the book. And this is something that was considered quite heavily by a man named Joseph Campbell in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, where he talks about, it's okay, Christopher, where he talks about the connections between myth and the connections between stories and how we tell them. And he says, throughout the inhabited world, in all times and under every circumstance, myths of man have flourished, and they have been the living inspiration of whatever else may have appeared out of the activities of the human body and mind. It would not be too much to say that myth is the secret opening through which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos pour into the human cultural manifestation. Religions, philosophies, arts, the social forms of primitive and historic man, prime discoveries in science and technology, the very dreams that blister sleep, boil up from the basic magic ring of myth. So Campbell was really influential in the development of storytelling, writing, and literary theory in his proposal that stories had shapes. So we can think about this in terms of the Joseph Campbell's monomyth, and what he says are the different stages of storytelling and myth. So we have this it's a story circle, and we have this instance of separation first. A character will become separated from the world they know before we tip around into what Campbell terms the initiation period, where they will enter into a new world, and then there will be a return to the original state, having learned something, having changed. And different signposts along this monomyth circle include things like the call to adventure, which is the first thing. So we can think about this in terms of Bilbo and Frodo getting invited out on an adventure by Gandalf. We can think about this in terms of the letters that crash through Harry Potter's door. We can think about this in terms of Cinderella. We can think about this in terms of Star Wars, Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan. There's this moment of crossing the first threshold between the stages of separation and initiation, where we can think about the time when Sam and Frodo leave the Shire for the first time in Lord of the Rings, or when Harry goes into Diagon Alley for the first time, or when Luke Skywalker leaves Tatooine. There's certain elements and shapes that are shared by stories And this is the notion of intertextuality, and it's brilliant in the fact that it suggests that there are both these universal things that are accepted about the shapes of stories, and it also suggests to us that these stories can provide something to us. Literature allows us to understand influence. Literature allows us to read in literature, and study in literature allows us to detect patterns. We can learn from literature. When we acknowledge influence, we begin to understand more. We begin to become more resilient. And yeah, literature, as I said before, is not just the study of words, it's the study of the world. It's the study of everything. Okay, right. Hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the ideas that we'll be discussing and some of the concepts. If anyone does have any questions, Christopher, I like some of this idea about the literature and fiction escaping into daily life. I think that you can see that, especially like, yeah, the placards that you see at people's protests, and the ongoing influence of the sort of this intertextual influence that we can see between. One of the things that springs to mind when you mention protest marches is the Handmaids from the Handmaid's Tale, and how there was sort of like rallies in America, like women's rights rallies, where people would dress up as handmaids. There is also a very strange phenomena of sexy handmaids costumes for Halloween, which doesn't seem right to me. Okay, is anyone in the chat? Does anyone in the chat have any questions? Anything specific that you want to ask? Anything about the text that we study? Anything about the format of the course itself, of the modules? Okay, if not, I will just briefly run through the order of the first year then. Can you get a copy of my book? You can read it. You can read it on Google. I think it's available for free on Google Books at the moment. Richard Leahy, Literary Illumination. It's a very dry, in-depth look at the influence of artificial light on the literature of the Victorian period, but there's some fun parts. So in the first year of your study of English literature at Chester, you will definitely take 2 core modules. One of which is Study in Literature, which is where we will study all of these things. So where we look at Hamlet, which is an all-time classic, and which is retold in a very unusual form in McEwan's Nutshell. But interesting to note the intertextual links between those. We look at Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol, immediately before Christmas, and we look at that in conjunction with Muppet's Christmas Carol. We think about the way that context, like I'm a 19th century expert, Victorianist, so we look at the way that the context of Dickens's time informs his writing. We look at Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Purple Hibiscus. In our we're constantly attempting to widen and diversify the canon of what is expected to be taught and what is expected to be studied at university level. This is a really excellent, fairly contemporary novel set in Nigeria. Offers us a very different perspective than some of the other texts. And we open the year with a study of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, which is, I think, it's an undeniable classic, but how does Dickens relate to the Muppets? This is a good question, Christopher. So yeah, I think that, well, if we think about Christmas Carol, most of the things we think about Christmas Carol are preconditioned and preconceived based on not having read the book. Like I know sort of, well, I can talk from personal experience growing up that a lot of my preconceptions about A Christmas Carol, the Charles Dickens story, were informed by adaptations. So again, we can think about how these adaptations have shaped our response to the text. We can think about whether the Muppets Christmas Carol, in its sort of cutesiness, how does that influence or affect the way that we interpret the impoverished drudgery of Dickens's contemporary period. So we can think, and it's quite useful as well for thinking about the characterization of the Cratchit family as well, because they get a certain sense of characterization and characterization and a bigger sense of an character arc in the Muppets Christmas Carol. So I think that's what we can say here. Okay, so in the other core module that you'll study in the first year of literary study at Chester is Approaches to Literature. It's one of my favourite modules. It's my baby. I run it and design it. And in this, we look at Harry Potter, Northern Lights by Philip Pullman, Philip Pullman also said that the true aim of writing is to enable a reader better to enjoy life or better to endure it. And I think that's what literature can offer us. It can improve our resilience while also improving our appreciation. So in Approaches to Literature, which is the other module that we do, we look at Harry Potter, Philip Pullman's Northern Lights, which has recently had a excellent, Christopher, interesting. Christmas Carol was so influential on Christmas itself. And we look at the Hunger Games in Approaches to Literature as well. The idea of Approaches to Literature is to provide you with the toolkit and sort of lenses that you need to read literature at university level. We look at theoretical aspects, theoretical models such as feminism, Marxism. We look at post-colonialism, deconstructionism, postmodernism, all of these different isms, all of these different methods and theories that we can use to interpret literature in different ways, and therefore interpret the world in different ways as well. The best reviews that I get of this class from my current crop of students are when they tell me that I've ruined their childhood because they'll never read Harry Potter in the same way again. But that again is really interesting. Like we can look at Harry Potter from all different perspectives. We can learn so much more about the world of Harry Potter, but also our world by analysing it in this sense. We use two key theory books there, Peter Barry's Beginning Theory and Andrew Bennett and Nicholas Royle's Introduction to Literature, Criticism and Theory. And they are both, I think they're both included in the Aspire book scheme, but they're both really excellent texts that are really, really influential in the teaching of our classes. Beyond that, into second and third year, we have a wide range of different options, different modules that we can cater to all sorts of different influences with, different interests with. I currently teach on the second year Gothic module, which is really fascinating module, looks at the development and history of Gothic and horror fiction, all the way from Frankenstein, arguably the first science fiction text, all the way from Frankenstein up to Stephen King's The Shining, Let the Right One In, and many more sort of dark and weird texts. My colleague Alex Tankard will be talking about some of them on Thursday, I believe. Beyond that, we've also got options that focus on science fiction. We run an alternative worlds module in the first year where we look at how different fictional worlds operate. We look at Westeros and Game of Thrones, for instance. Beyond that, into third year, there's modules focused on Irish literature, on South African literature, again, trying to diversify and decolonize this canon. There's also modules that focus on my research interests, 19th century literature and culture. We have a very knowledgeable staff here who and with different research specialisms, different research interests. Some of our we try and operate with a really new, fresh, innovative assessment style as well. We've started to adopt different assessment practices into the modules over the past year or so. There's a module, a really fascinating module called Fashioning Fictions, which is run by our head of department. that looks at fashion in literature and how depictions of clothing, depictions of appearance have changed or shifted during the course of civilized development. And one of the assessment practices that we use there is to use a portfolio of creative work. So students can create collages, they can create, I think they can even submit Instagram posts as well. Okay, any further questions? Anybody watching in the chat, in the audience? If not, then I'll continue to talk for a couple more minutes. Okay. Right, so a few things about our. Thank you, Emily. There is. It's coming very soon. The English office staff is currently putting it together. We're just finalising some modules, but we're aiming to get the reading lists available for first years immediately. But the reading lists themselves. Let me find this. Okay, there is a reading list. It's coming fairly soon. It's coming fairly soon. Yeah, it's being put together at the moment. But brief outline: Pride and Prejudice would be the first thing studied. Dickens is A Christmas Carol would then be the first thing. Would be the second thing studied. Shakespeare's Hamlet, third thing studied, and these three as well. So Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Philip Pullman's Northern Lights, and Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Games. Alongside this, there will also be supplementary material that you'll start first year studies by looking at romantic poetry, which will all be given to you in a collected anthology, which we'll produce from within the department. But yeah, that's the reading list will be finalised very soon. We've got a departmental meeting tomorrow. It will be finalised then, and hopefully be sent out as soon as possible as well. What else do I have to talk about? Chester itself. So yeah, studying at Chester, the English department. I can't emphasize the sort of the quality of the building where we teach from. We teach out of the vicarage, which is an old vicarage, believe it or not, just off the grounds of the main campus. It's really cute. It's really cozy. It's really nice. It's really inspirational. Gets the mind juices flowing. You can find pictures of that on our departmental webpage, so I highly recommend taking a look at that. I've been missing it so much, having to work from home, but hopefully we'll be back in there before too long. And Chester is just, I think that Chester's English department, we often have like departmental events running where students can get involved. Lecturers are active in their research interests. Chester is unfortunately still in lockdown, Christopher, sadly, hence why I'm in my kitchen. So what was I talking about? Yeah, Chester's, it's really nice, it's really cozy, it's really comfy. We've got a really community-driven English department here. We have poetry open mic nights, bring your own alcohol poetry open mic nights, which are still carrying on regardless of the lockdown via Zoom and Teams and things like that. So that's good. Nice sense of community. Yeah, the Flash magazines, Christopher, excellent. The Flash magazines are another really interesting example of what we do in Chester. The Flash magazines are run by the creative writing department, and they focus on short stories, short stories, stories of 300 words or less. So we've had a lot of submissions from quite well-known authors. I think Roddy Doyle, Margaret Atwood, maybe as well. There's the flash fiction short story collections are really, really fascinating. Okay, fab. Well, if anyone has any questions, you can reach me on Leahy, that's Leahy, at chester.ac.uk. So if anyone has any further questions or needs further information, direct any questions to there. Hope that you've enjoyed something or taken something away from me talking at you in my kitchen today. And yeah, hopefully see some of you in real life come September, October time. Okay, bye for now.